That may blow some people's mind, but it's time for me to blow yours. Pause. Harry Potter. Murder-Suicide Pact, kind of a sad story. Two brothers killed their family members in a murder-suicide pact in Texas. They were depressed.
Damn.
Not necessarily sure. I didn't read the entirety of the suicide note, but it was quite long. And basically, they agreed that life sucked and that they were going to kill themselves and their family. So 6 people dead in a murder-suicide pact in Texas. Interesting note. I just kind of fucked up. It's a note. In the suicide note, he spoke of the gun laws not being effective and that basically he could just get a gun. He basically said the gun laws are a joke. I'm depressed. I've been depressed, and I can just say I'm not depressed and then go get a gun.
I have so many questions.
I probably don't have the answers, but go ahead.
Maybe not for you to answer, but just in general, I wonder what type of regimen was he on. Was he going to see a therapist, psychiatrist, counselor? Was he speaking to someone to know he's depressed? Was he open with his feelings with his friends and families? Was he open with his feelings with his coworkers? What avenues was he taking to curb this depression? What avenues was he taking to make it known about his mental health issues? Because this kind of goes in, it's like, oh, I can go buy a gun and I'm depressed. All I have to do is say I'm not. Well, yeah. Well, when you lie and don't tell the truth, people tend to not know the truth. So if I have no reason to believe you're in bad mental state and you go and purchase a gun and then lie and say you're in a fine mental state, is that really whose fault? That's your fault, my friend. You know what I mean? Like, don't, yeah, we could clean it up and add some more checks and balances and like steps. But if you're just going to lie and not take the avenues to benefit yourself, then what do you want the world to do about that?
I hear you. I just, it was kind of a sad story. I saw that if somebody took they decided that the gun laws were bad and then still decided to bypass them and prove a point by committing suicide and murdering their family. I'm like, man, that is some deep-rooted shit.
Yeah, you have problems in general. Like let's not come at gun laws from a dude that's clearly mentally unfit.
We're going to move on from that to Bhad Bhabie. What's her name? Danny Bergoli. She's
Catch Me Outside. How about that?
better known as the Catch Me Outside girl from Dr. Phil. All these hoes laughing.
Bitch-ass hoe could never.
She made some good money by making an OnlyFans page, apparently.
$1 million in 6 hours.
That's pretty solid. I wish that I was famous for being an overall dumbass, but I will say this. I checked out her Instagram. She's in the news, and I have to do research, and I have to pay attention to fucking everything.
Calm down. We understand.
So I went on to the Instagram, and she had the video where she was calling out Dr. Phil, saying that, he had this much time to basically issue an apology for sending people to Turnabout Ranch, where apparently people are being sexually assaulted, but that wasn't the thing that really got me. She was talking about her experience at Turnabout Ranch, where basically she was taken from where she was staying, right? She went there and they basically kidnapped her, from what she said. And then they made her sit outside for 3 days. Sit down, not lay down. She was not allowed to sleep for 3 days. Like, what is this, the
verified?
fucking Navy SEALs, Dr. Phil?
Now, I hate to say that, but she said so much wild shit before.
Facts.
Has this been verified?
Dude, I don't know. I don't know, but
well, for the sake of it, let's pretend that this is verified moving forward.
That's always so. Whenever you hear an argument, you always somebody said this. You always be sympathetic of the premise, which is you always believe that the information you're being told is true, and then try to work out the conclusions. If this is true,
I agree, but she's definitely been untruthful before in the past. So that's the only reason I brought that up.
Makes sense. I mean, she stole her mom's car. What a piece of shit she actually really was.
Well, I mean, she lied about a lot of other things, but we'll continue on.
The yeah, so she said that like a lot of crazy shit, that somebody was murdered while she was there. Apparently, like one of the people that was there killed some people. So it's not necessarily a safe place.
Getting a little elevated.
But yeah, like I was thinking about this and whether you should send people to kind of a ranch to begin with like that. Like I understand sending people to military schools and stuff like that in a way, but
It's kind of the same premise, no?
I don't think that those are that's the best way to handle a developing teen, right?
Oh no, especially when like her outcry seemed to be that for of attention-seeking behavior. You're not teaching that another way or addressing that. You're kind of just depriving them of more attention. It's kind of, to me, it seems you're going to get the inverse reaction of what you want.
Yeah, not only that, but like I'm thinking about this from like the psychological development standpoint that at 14 or however old she is, I mean, you're not all that rational, right? You're not really even supposed to be all that rational, right? You're kind of being trained, so I kind of understand like why you would like implement extreme discipline to try to bring out extreme discipline, but what we have seen is that putting people into what you and I call it the dark side. Basically, if you put people through extreme adversity, they don't necessarily go in the direction that you want them to go. They go hard in a direction, but not necessarily the one you want. Right?
Well,
there's been extreme
Jordan
cases.
Peterson,
go ahead.
I was like, Jordan Peterson on his podcast, he was talking to Brett Weinstein recently, and they were kind of talking about interventions and how, I forget the stat, but it was the vast majority of interventions don't follow the outline of the outcome that you anticipate when you go into the intervention. And then it's kind of getting to the point that people are questioning whether extreme interventions, kind of like with her, you're intervening and putting her into an extreme location in the living space.
Right.
Those most of the time don't warrant the results that you anticipate. So is that actually a healthy thing to be doing, especially at such a young age, 13 to 14? That's hefty levels of discipline for a young teenager to deal with.
Well, like I said, that's essentially, I mean, the military does this to 17 people
18
between 17 and a half to 36 years old, that you go through something that is mentally difficult. It's somewhat physically difficult depending on what branch you go to. It can be more physically difficult than others, but you get they say you get tore down and then built back up, but essentially what from my experience is that it was torn down the whole time, and the confidence you had was in the very small things, and you become hyper focused and proud of your completion. You get proud that you made it out of the other end. You don't really ever get acknowledgement while you're there. That's not really what the game is.
I feel like they almost teach you to find enjoyment out of avoiding consequences. Like they take so much time to lay out these relatively extreme for what it is consequences to every little thing you do, and then you almost rejoice into not dealing with a negative consequence. Like you find your happiness by avoiding the consequence. Like you don't find your happiness from any type of positive feedback or accolade or acknowledgement. It's just more or less, I'm happy that I didn't have to reap the consequences if I didn't do that right.
Well, and then, the other side of this coin is that like the difference between putting a child who is individually has issues into the environment, like Turnabout Ranch, and basic training is that you basically, it's constant adversity that you have to tackle with a group of people, a large group of people, 50 people, approximately 50 people have to work together in order to accomplish tasks, and weak links are going to be present, and therefore you will have failures, so you have to take failures as a whole team, and the team becomes the blame. It's never the individual. and
Never.
you work through it in that way. But sending someone to something similar to that as an individual is a much, much different story, because your failures are your own, and that is incredibly difficult to conquer, especially if any of you have played an individual sport or done something by yourself, or had trouble in school. You realize that like it's really hard to be confident about yourself and the place you're in when you are tore down as an individual. So I don't know if this is effective.
Well, in my mind you're trying to address traumatic events that lead to traumatic behavior. Like her behavior, as wild as it is, comes from some sort of traumatic upbringing. Like there's something that happened, either the way your mother was, the environment you're in, something has caused you trauma, and this is how you learn to cope with it. Now, you're not going to teach a 13, 14-year-old how to deal with traumatic events by traumatizing them further.
Yeah, that's basically
you're going
what
to just
she
reinforce
meant.
these coping methods that they've already developed, most likely unhealthy coping mechanisms. But you can't treat traumatic behavior with more trauma.
Right.
You got to have discipline, and you got to find avenues around that, and that's why I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have the answers to this, but from a base level, I can tell you, you don't take a traumatized child and traumatize them more and then tell them, now go be normal.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I absolutely agree with you. It was something I was thinking about in my head, trying to figure out I don't know. Dr. Phil is a professional in a lot of ways, but I don't know how much of this idea is a partnership idea with him or what, or a gimmick to gain clout, to keep the show going. Forget,
Dr. Phil was a professional to the full extent, even going so far as dicking down his secretary in his office and losing his private practice.
That's true.
Just for the people.
That may blow some people's mind, but it's time for me to blow yours. Pause.
Heavy pause.
Husky's Mind Blowers. The next iteration of that. This is more of a question for him. This one, he probably is going to stand up like he's a Catholic kid and talking about his catechism. What are the real primary colors? What are the primary colors?
Oh, we're all taught these. I thought I knew until you just asked me that. Red, green, blue?
Red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue are the primary colors. They are considered the additive primary colors.
Fuck.
But did you know that there's the subtractive primary colors? Now, I'm going to ask you another follow-up question because I don't get to ask follow-up questions very often because my wife hates it when I do this. This is an exercise that some people can handle.
Okay.
Why is the paper toner magenta, cyan, and yellow?
That's because they're worried about gang affiliations and gangbang consequences.
So, cyan, yellow, and magenta are the subtractive primary colors.
That makes more sense.
The idea behind these are a different spectrum, right? They're on the other, like if you were to tilt the color wheel over, that these colors are the lighter shades, and therefore you don't have to add as much, right? So if you want to mix the colors together, like your cyan and magenta, I believe you would get
lesser ratios.
Red or purple, I believe. I don't remember. I'm not an artist, but I thought this was really interesting. I had it all up and I closed it out, but basically you don't have to, it makes it, you have the ability to have more vivid colors, right? So if as a kid you were given a palette with cyan, magenta, and yellow, you would be able to draw and mix colors, right, for painting more effectively than you would be with red, green, and blue, right? Because they're so dark.
That makes sense. Ability to mix.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I had never thought about that the primary colors are not necessarily the primary colors. And how I thought about this was they're talking about. I was
let me ask you this real
looking
quick.
at lighting. Go ahead.
So, which ones are the actual primary colors? Is it the magenta, cyan, and
It's both, man. There's not really such thing as an actual primary. The reason why they're called the primary colors, right? Because you know this. We're gonna get really nerdy. That we're only operating like we're basically intaking light as a wavelength, right? It's radiation, so we have a limited spectrum that we can see, and therefore it's the primary colors that are in our spectrum, right?
But not the most prevalent colors because we just don't perceive.
We have cones and whatever cones and rods. I don't remember.
Cones and rods.
They're in your eyeball that they perceive these lights. So what you see, right? What exists in your eye are red, green, and blue, basically sensors, right? That's what it picks up on. So that's why we consider them the primary colors. However, how you achieve mixing of colors, which is more important when you're discussing what is actually primary, right? Because if you were to give you a base set of colors in order to make other colors, you would actually want cyan, magenta, and yellow.
Fun fact question for you.
Go ahead.
What is black?
Black is, as a light, nothing.
It's the absence of color.
But as a pigment, it is something that black would be the absorption of all light as a pigment.
Indeed.
So, this is a
technically
fun science class for you guys.
If you want to get technical, black isn't actually a color; it's the absence.
Right. But
that's not how it works when you got crayons and Easter eggs.
We also say colors. Colors are pigments, is what we use colors for. They actually exist as like a wavelength, but it's the wavelength being reflected, not what's being absorbed.
Correct.
So that's it for the show. I don't really have any announcements. I still need to talk to my boy Andy Feichter. We got to figure out this podcast. It's been rough trying to work out the logistics. I know that you're working on Not Your Baby Daddy.
Hopefully coming soon.
Left nuts are free is not an actual thing. We are posting clips. I think the clips are they're going mostly well. They're glowing. I almost just said I could have just left it. The clips are glowing. Watch them more. Share them more. I know that they're fun. I know that it's fun to just watch, but let other people get involved. I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You guys, we always get likes, but are we actually doing good? Do you want us to say anything else? We don't get any feedback. It's just likes and dislikes, and we only get likes. So let us know.
You know, my DMs are pretty dry. If you want to hit me up, I got time. I'll holler at you. I do want to take this moment to shout out to Mr. DMX. Maybe not been a good week for him in the hospital. Limited brain function. Shout out to the Rough Riders. DMX, voice of a generation. Appreciate you.
His version of the Reading Rainbow was my favorite.
That's my favorite reindeer song. DMX, he's just been a cultural staple for a long time. So shout out to him. Hope he gets back. Stay off from drug kids. Drugs are bad. Okay.
If you've made it this far, catch us on YouTube, like and subscribe. It helps us out. And we're done. Left hooks are free. Right hooks are always half off.
Free.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Half off. It's a crotch party right up in here.